Of increasing face was scene after scene after scene of increasingly brutal conduct by federal agents, often targeted at U.S. citizens these days, and an avalanche of disinformation from Donald Trump and his cabinet about what the Trump administration is actually doing on our streets and in our cities. The American people are, at least for now, choosing to believe their own eyes and their own ears. Growing numbers of Americans reacting to the Trump administration with a rising tide of revulsion and conviction to resist efforts to militarize American cities. Not only do half of all Americans say that the shooting of Renee Nicole Good by an ICE agent was not justified, about a half, 47% of all Americans, say that ICE is making the country less safe. That contrasts to 34% of Americans who say it's making the country safer. That is a 30-point swing, a 30-point shift from a year ago, from the start of Donald Trump's second presidency. That same poll shows that more people now say that ICE should be abolished than say that we should keep ICE. That dramatic, seismic political swing is the result, it's the consequence of people seeing scenes like these out of Minneapolis. We'll take you through them. Yesterday, a woman who says she's disabled was violently yanked out of her car. Her window was smashed. Her seatbelt was cut to yank her out of the car. There she is, resisting. She said she was just driving down the street where a protest happened to be taking place and was just on her way to go to the doctor. She's trying to get to a doctor's appointment. This is from Sunday. An ICE agent is kneeling on the neck of a protester, a particularly shocking and disturbing and jarring image from any standpoint, much less Minneapolis, where George Floyd was murdered 5 years ago. In a statement, the Department of Homeland Security insisted that the minimum amount of force necessary was used, and then they said that this video represented a, quote, split second of the incident.
This simple but brilliant device is helping seniors prevent cognitive decline. A 78-year-old Tai Chi master just exposed why they buried.
Looks like a little longer than a split second to me. This one's from Target last week, where two men, Christian Miranda Romano and Jonathan Aguilar Garcia, were tackled and then detained at a store at which they worked. Both men are U.S. citizens. They were later released. This took place at a gas station on Sunday. Border Patrol agents, led by Commander Gregory Bovino, smashed a car window and took a driver into custody. That same day, ICE agents smashed the window of a car. They pulled two activists out of the car, and then they detained them. Here they are yanking them out of the car, physically, throwing them onto the car. On Monday, ICE agents also rammed Christian Molina's car, then stopped him to check his immigration status. Here's what he told our colleague, reporter Alex Tabbitt.
I was going down the road, coming to my mechanic to get my other car fixed. My wife was following me behind. So I was driving down the road and I saw this ICE car in the alley. And so I was driving by, I just looked at them. Once I looked at them, they ran into me right away, start following me for no reason, just because I looked. So I got a little scared at first. I was like, why is this car following me for? I didn't make no violation, any traffic violation. So I kept on going. Once I took another left, they speed up and they just ran into my car and hit me, trying to stop me.
You're an American citizen?
I am, yes.
Why do you think they stopped you?
Because I look Latino. I'm brown and I got mustache.
No one, not even city officials, are spared from the use of force and brutal tactics on the part of ICE agents. A federal agent was filmed shoving Elliot Payne, the president of the Minneapolis City Council. Here's what he said in an interview on our network.
It feels like a military occupation. It feels like we're under assault by our federal government. We're seeing people walking around with assault rifles and full military gear, and then they will just dump people off without medical care after essentially torturing them. And this is the most un-American thing I can imagine.
The backlash, growing backlash from the public to scenes of brutality in Minneapolis is where we start today. Senior contributing editor, Minneapolis native Michelle Norris is with us. She was on the ground all week covering the story and the response among its citizens in Minneapolis. With me at the table, Media Matters President Angela Carasone is here. And joining us at the table as well, host of Politics Nation, president of the National Action Network, the Reverend Al Sharpton. Michelle, I start with you. Some of these incidents happened or were starting to happen while you were there. You covered a woman being profiled or seemingly profiled and taken from a bus stop. But all those other incidents obviously happening in full view of bystanders who are taking video of them seem to be escalating on the part of ICE. Where do residents of Minneapolis fear this is heading?
They fear that we haven't seen the bottom of it. They fear that the escalation is going to continue because the numbers are increasing. They're sending more agents from ICE, from CPB into the city. And at a moment where you think that they might be trying to de-escalate this, you know, after the killing of a woman, after all these incidents that are all over the evening news, on the front page of the newspapers, they're doing just the opposite. Nicole, the line between policing and warfare is getting uncomfortably fuzzy. And when riot gear functions more as a provocation than protection, we should all be, concerned about that. No matter where you live in Minneapolis, you're affected by this. Most of the pictures you showed were very near where I grew up. I recognize these streets, but if you live in the suburbs, if you live in the outer rung of the city, if you even live elsewhere in the state, the raids are happening all over the state. You're impacted in some way because people aren't showing up for work at hospitals, at schools, at restaurants. Your local dry cleaner may not be able to deliver your clothing because there's nobody working out back. They're arresting people and taking them out of cars and then just leaving the cars in the road. And so there are traffic jams. There was a case where they pulled someone out of a car and they didn't put the car in park. And so the car starts, rolling toward people walking on the sidewalk. And luckily they were able to get in that car and put it in park before it hit somebody. But Keith Ellison told me this weekend, Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison said, it feels like the Trump administration has declared war on the state of Minnesota. From the pictures that you've shown, it looks like they have declared war on the state of Minnesota. And people throughout the state, whether they're Democrat or Republican, whether they're immigrant or not, are really concerned about this now and are worried that it's only the beginning because many of the ICE combat groups or the enforcement groups, I call them combat groups because they look like they're there for combat, but they're enforcement groups, now have 60-day reservations at the hotels. So that shows that this has got a very long tail. And if this is the way they're responding at the beginning, it's not clear where it's going. They do have until, I think, January 18th to respond to the lawsuit. And maybe that might be a way to narrow the parameters and the scope of these sweeps, but for now, they seem to be more aggressive, and there are more of them on the streets, and that is having a significant impact on the tenor of life throughout the state of Minnesota.
Michelle, I want to play something from a protester who sort of, I think, embodies what the polling shows, that this isn't really right-left. This almost gets into territory of government overreach. And what do you want your government to do in the name of its citizens? Let me play that for you.
If a donation makes sense for you right now, I'm asking you to pitch in to the Democratic Party's Fight Fund. Let me explain.
They're constantly in my neighborhoods. Everybody's in fear. Whether you're a citizen or not, it's just causing so much chaos. And I live right next to that Target where those two workers were pulled out the other day. And I lean more on the right for a lot of issues. But when it comes to human rights, that's just something that I think is very important for a lot of people.
Again, going into Target, a company that I think has some sort of channel to the administration. I remember when tariffs were announced, there was some pressure on them not to raise their prices. Going in and seizing 2 employees of a Target violently, no less, later releasing them. What is, and increasingly people with status, legal status, and American citizens being swept up, what is the stated objective to what they say they're doing, Michelle?
Well, you'd have to ask them because it's very unclear. I mean, they said the pretext for this was coming in to root out fraud. If you were going to do that, you would be focusing on accountants and people who were actually involved in fraud, not people who work at Target. So, it's not clear what the objective is, but the impact is increasingly clear. Talk to police, people who work in the police department who said that they've quietly talked to folks in other jurisdictions, police officers in other jurisdictions, who say that they're not certain that they, in some of them in red states, not sure that they would want federal agents to come in who are accountable to no one. That is not comfortable for anyone. And you mentioned that this happened at a Target. Target is based in Minnesota. It's, one of several very large companies that are based in Minnesota. There are 17 Fortune 500 companies based in Minnesota. If you widen the aperture out to Fortune 800 or Fortune 1000, that number increases by quite a bit. And there's a question about what is the business community going to say about this? That means having to stand up to Donald Trump, which is not comfortable for them. There's some risk assessment there. But this impacts everyday life in Minnesota, and it significantly impacts the economy. Imagine if you're trying to recruit someone to come to the state of Minnesota right now for a job. When I flew, I'm not in Minnesota anymore. I'm back in Washington, D.C. When I flew home, Nicole, I was on a plane with several parents who had taken their children to go see Minnesota schools. Could you imagine as a parent sending your child to a school in the state of Minnesota, a university of the state of Minnesota, a college in the state of Minnesota right now? So this has impacts all across the board. And as I've said to you before, I don't know what the stated objective, the formal objective is, but it's clear that in some ways they're using the state of Minnesota as a proving ground to try to get Americans used to the idea of militaristic and very aggressive law enforcement, which could drift into militaristic and very aggressive policing. Ironically, in a city that kicked off a very robust debate and eventually reforms around policing because of what happened to George Floyd.